study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. And of course, this one here is not an option, and it's not a suggestion. It's not a helpful possibility. It's a command. God's telling us that this is something that needs to be done. That we do need to study, and we do need to take the word of truth and rightly divide it in order to understand it, to profit from it, to learn from it, to grow from it, to learn what it has to say. And so when we do this, we are commanded to study in order to learn what it has to say. And so there's one of the main reasons why everyone in town goes to what they call church on Sunday and walk away worse when they leave than when they walk in, because they don't study. They don't learn it. If we look at Luke chapter 12, verse 11, a lot of people hear this every Sunday or every other Sunday, and this is what they think is happening today because it's a Bible verse. And it's Luke chapter 12, verse 11. They think, well, I don't need to study because there's such a thing as this verse here. And we may have all heard this before. But Luke chapter 12, verse 11 goes on to say that, and when they shall bring you into the synagogues and unto magistrates and powers, taking no thought how or what thing ye shall answer or what ye shall say. For the Holy Ghost shall teach you in that same hour what ye ought to say. So people think, well, I don't need to study. The Holy Ghost, it says there, right there in Luke chapter 12, verse 11, the Holy Ghost is going to teach me what to say, how to speak, what to articulate. So to study would actually be to shun the Holy Ghost, and I'm not going to study because the Holy Ghost will just tell me what to say, or what to do, or what to think, or what to be, or how to act. And so that's one reason why people don't study. People who profess Christianity, they won't do that. But we see that there. But some of the theologies that are out there, one of the reasons why you asked, Ryan, why is it that we're rightly dividing? What makes these other people, so off? Well, why are they? What are they learning every week? What are they doing every week? And so we're going to go over some multiple theologies that are out there, and in every church, on every street corner, what do they have going on every week? And so we're going to just take a look at the theologies that are out there. And we'll look at 6 or 7 of them. There's probably 20, 30, 40, 50 of them. But for the sake of tonight, we'll look at about maybe 6 or 7 of them. And we'll see what's mainly going on in most of the churches. Again, so-called denominations, religions, whatever you want to call it. And, what are these guys learning every week? So in a broad brush, we'll see. And the first one is called a covenant theology. And so while we're learning dispensational theology, and we'll get into what that is, of course, covenant theology says that, well, first of all, it's practiced by people who are mainly gap theorists, Reformed theologians, some Presbyterians, some Episcopalians, some Methodists, and some 5-point, or mainly a lot of 5-point Calvinists. The covenant theologians, they see no difference in any of the Bible. When they see the word gospel, they say the word gospel is gospel, whether it's gospel for the Jews, gospel in time past, gospel in the future, gospel for the grace of God. That's all one gospel. It's one book with one plan for one people. That's how covenant theologians read the Bible. When they read the Bible, they say from Genesis to Revelation, it's one story for one group of people with one plan. So there is no difference between Jew or Gentile. There's no difference between Jews and the body of Christ. It's all just one big group of people. That's how they read that. So that means there's one gospel for one group of people. And so they eliminate dispensational distinctives that way. So they do that. They see no difference between when it says the word church. So when you have Moses taking the Jews through the wilderness, that's our church, they would say. When you have the church being persecuted by the Antichrist and the tribulation, that would be us. When you have the church going through, being persecuted in Acts, in the book of Acts, shortly after the Holy Ghost comes in Acts chapter 2, they would say that that would be us, because it's one church, one gospel, one book, one everything. And that's covenant. They look at the Bible through covenants rather than dispensations. And they say, if it's in the book, it's all me. And so that's one of the things that they learn. They go through this, and these are a lot of things that people hear every week. So they said that it's, one plan, one gospel for one group of people that's taught throughout the scriptures. They deny dispensational truth. They deny that God has a plan for Israel and for the body of Christ, just that God has a plan for everything, and it's viewed through covenants. And they call it the covenant of works and the covenant of grace. And so if you think about that terminology, covenant of grace is a contradiction in itself. You can't have God's grace being poured out to you inside of a covenant, because in a covenant, you've got to work for that. That's something where if you do this, then you get blessed. And if you don't do this, then you get cursed. So, we see that there. And, and then you've got the difference between a covenant and a testament. But those are two different things in itself. So, but covenant theology, that's what gets taught a lot in a lot of different churches. You'll hear that mainly in the Reformed theology, the Baptist, the Methodist, the Episcopalians, and so on every week. That's what's being taught, so that when they go to a verse in their Bible, especially Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they're just saying that's us. We're them and they're us. And they go through that every week. So they choose to plug Paul into Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and vice versa. There is no difference between Israel and the church. They therefore make this whole book, promises. They have the promises of God written to everybody, or to all of us. So that's just the first part. That's covenant theology, where it's not based on God explaining his plan progressively throughout the ages, throughout time, throughout dispensations. It's that it's all one plan, given all one people. And I don't know if that helps out a little bit, but we're starting to see that based on what people are hearing, that's why they're choosing not to believe what's being taught in the scriptures, because they're not taking the scriptures literal. They're taking the scriptures according to the agenda being taught, the religious agenda. So
a lot of noise.
Yeah.
A lot of background noise.
Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, I don't know if there's anyone got anything going on in the back, but
yeah, it's a lot of background noise.
Yeah. But yeah, does anyone have any thoughts so far on covenant theology based on?
Sounds like almost everything we hear today
Yeah.
from most people that we know.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because what you want to do is when you come to the Bible, you want to see, can I read this book literally? Can I, well, the God of the Bible, can I come to this book and believe what God says to whom he says it? And can I believe what the God of the universe is actually saying? Can I take him literally? Can I literally read these words and believe what he says to the person that he's actually saying it to in the time period that he's speaking? Or do I have to somehow twist the words in order to line it up with what the religion is saying?
What he really means is.
Yeah. And then the pastor will say, well, what God really meant to say is this, not that. And what he's really trying to say, and the most famous one is what you'll get is Romans 4 and James 2, where they match the two up and they say, oh, it says the same thing. And I think that's the one. Is it Romans 4? Yeah, I think it's Romans 4 and James 2 is where they'll say that it says the same thing, and it says the exact opposite thing. But when you are a covenant theologian, And you're saying that this is one book to one people, and it's all one plan and one purpose, and there is no difference between Israel and the body of Christ, then you have a hard time taking contradictory verses and saying that this belongs to different people in a different time and a different place, and this verse belongs to another people in another time and another place. You have an extremely hard time because you're looking at everything through covenants, and you're saying, well, that's my covenant back in, the Davidic covenant is my covenant. The covenant that God gave to Noah, that's mine too. And the covenant that God gave to this guy, that goes all to me. So everything goes to me. Everything belongs to me in this Bible. Everything, all the promises, all the curses, all the blessings, all the covenants, everything belongs to me.
Do you really think they believe that all the curses belong to them?
No, I don't
See,
think.
I can't, I don't see that either.
Yeah.
They just want the blessings.
Yeah.
They don't deserve the curses.
Yeah, and so they'll twist that too. They'll read where Old Testament Israel gets the blessings and the cursings, but when it comes to actually going through with the cursings part, that's where they're going to excuse themselves from the cursings and say, well, that just belongs to those guys back there, and it turns out they're dispensational, and they won't admit that when it comes to covenant theology. That they're actually going to plug into that.
So it's cafeteria style.
Yeah.
They pick and choose what they
They're
want.
picking and choosing what they want. And so this is why we come along and we're instructing those that oppose themselves at 2 Timothy 2:24 when it comes to covenant theology. We're coming along and we're saying that's not going to work. If you're trying to take this Bible literally, this is not going to work. And this is why this works for us. And this is why it will not work for them. This is why when you take dispensational theology and plug it in, you can take this Bible literally. And you can go ahead and say, well, yes, this is an absolute contradiction. And there are thousands upon thousands of contradictions in the Bible, and that's okay. Because you're not saying that they're errors. You're not saying that they're mistakes. You're not saying that that's wrong. You're saying that these people over here have instructions to do one thing. And that these people over here have instructions to do something totally different. Adam and Eve have a dietary program in Genesis, I believe it's 1:26 or something, to do this. And later on, it changes to do this. And then later on, Leviticus 11 says to do this for the Jews. And then later on in 2 Timothy 4, we're instructed to eat all things, as long as we're thankful for it. And if we all think it's one thing to one person, then we have a hard time debating. We're never going to talk about certain verses because it's going to bring up the fact that it's contradictory. We're never going to speak of it. So we won't engage the entire Bible. We'll never read through the entire Bible. We'll never study the entire Bible because we're going to come across things that we're going to bump into our theology. It's going to bump into our the things that we're holding on to that we want to grab onto so much in covenant theology. And so that's why that's not going to work for these guys. And why it works so well for us as dispensational, as mid-acts dispensationalists.
So would you say this is the most common in the Christian era, so-called Christian?
It's I would say it's one of. I'd say it's probably one of the biggest, covenant theology. So that's the first thing. So that's why we instruct those that oppose themselves, and then as Ryan asked a good question. He said, why are so many people not getting on board with this? Where else are they going? And one of them is covenant theology. So that's an excellent question. That's a great question. And that's one of the places they're going to is covenant theology. And they may not even know it. They may not even refer to it as covenant theology. They just say, well, this is what the pastor teaches every Sunday. They may not call it that because they don't know what it's called. Mm-hmm. But they're just saying, well, that's all written to me, so I'm going to do it. And that's what they do. That's what they say. But the second one, after covenant theology, is replacement theology. And so if every church in our town is not doing covenant theology, one of the other things is replacement theology. And replacement theology, you've got your Roman Catholics, you got your United Methodists, you've got your Mormons, you got your Church of Christ, you got your Jehovah's Witnesses, and you have your Assemblies of God. And what they do is replacement theology. What that says is that God has set aside Israel, and God has set aside Israel, but not temporarily. He set them aside permanently. This is where it goes wrong. Replacement theology says that now we are Israel. And so all of Israel's plans and blessings and identity and their position and their walk and their curses is who we are. We're not the church, the body of Christ, we're Israel. And so we're stealing their identity. We're what's it called when someone steals your identity?
Identity theft.
Yeah, identity theft. They're identity thieves.
Gotta get lifelock.
So yeah. So replacement theology is someone who steals their identity. And so they pretty much say that God has set aside literal Israel. And he has, but he has not plugged in the body of Christ as the new Israel. And so what they'll say is in the church that the city that you live in, whether it's Orlando, whether it's, whatever it is, Chicago or New York or whatever it is, they'll say, well, no, that's what you could call Jerusalem now. So when you read the Bible and you read Deuteronomy and you read Exodus and you read, First Kings or Second Kings, that's wherever it says Jerusalem, you can put in Orlando. You can put in, so you're spiritual Israel and you live in spiritual Jerusalem. And so you no longer take the Bible literally at all. You take it spiritually. And so whenever it says to do an instruction, you can say, well, I spiritually do that. And so when you say, go to Luke chapter 12, verse, I think it's 32. That's the verse that you always take when someone says that they do everything in the Bible. You always take them to Luke 12 and see what they say. Luke 12:32, I think it is. Let me see. 32. That's one with the little flock.
Moving into 33.
Yeah, 33. That's it. Luke 12:33. And pretty much what Luke 12:33 says is that sell that ye have and give alms. Provide yourselves bags which wax not old, a treasure that in the heavens that faileth not, where no thief approacheth, neither doth corrupteth. So there's an instruction that the Lord Jesus Christ gives to, of course, what you see in verse 32, the little flock of Israel. So we know through dispensational Bible study, the Lord's talking to Israel, telling them to sell all that they have. And the whole reason is they got to avoid the mark of the beast. They got to avoid the Antichrist when that comes up, avoid his economy so they can go through God's economy. They'll be taken care of. They'll be fed with manna. They'll get through the tribulation. Everything will take place. And it'll fit literally. It'll fit perfectly. But when you go into replacement theology, you're going to now disregard anything literally. You're going to say, well, I do that. In Luke 12:33, I have spiritually sold all that I have. And Jesus now spiritually reigns in my heart. And everything that I have in this room, it all belongs to Jesus. I've spiritually sold it. I've spiritually done it. I haven't literally done it because you're not taking anything in the Bible literally. You're not believing anything. You don't think that God, the God of the universe, can be taken literally. So you're going to spiritually do whatever you want. And so when somebody says, well, what do you think about this verse? You're going to take it and spiritualize it. You're not going to take it literally, which we should. And you're going to, again, look at it because you think that you're Israel. You're going to look at it because you think that God has replaced literal Israel with you and me. And we're going to look at every verse and we're going to try to take that either metaphorically, allegorically, spiritually. And replacement theology now says, since we have replaced Israel, we now are on board with their plan and their purpose of the earthly kingdom. And so, we see that there. And that's where it goes through. And that's why they say, well, nobody can really understand what God says, so we have to approach all this spiritually. We're spiritual Israel living in a spiritual Jerusalem. The city we live in is spiritual Israel or spiritual Jerusalem, which would be Orlando or whatever it is. And, we spiritually obey the scriptures, all of them. We spiritually obey the law is spiritually in our spiritual hearts, and we spiritually do everything spiritually. So there's nothing literally going on. There's no actual application of any scripture going on. So that's the second thing that's going on in our in our towns every week, on every Sunday, as we instruct those that oppose themselves, whether it be covenant theology or replacement theology. And as you go along and you explain that to, say, the Roman Catholics or the United Methodists, or to some of the Pentecostals, the Assemblies of God, the Church of Christ, and you say, you're plugged into some replacement theology, they'll say, well, what does that mean? What are you talking about? Because they don't know what that is. They just know the pastor tells them to take it spiritually, and that's what they run off and do.
Who started replacement theology? I mean, you can look at people like the guy who started Jehovah's Witnesses and all that kind of stuff. But who started replacement theology? How far back does that go?
It goes back, well, some of this, not all of it.
Does it go back to Origin? Does it go back?
Some of it can go back as far back as that. I wouldn't say Origin per se is the guy, but some of these theologies can go back to Constantine.
With Catholicism.
Yeah, Catholicism. I mean, with that, it can go back to
Catholicism goes back as far as Origin. I mean, Origin is the one who came up with a lot of the goofy ideas Catholics had.
Yeah, but I'm not sure about necessarily replacement
Replacement
theology, because every denomination has branched off, whether it be the 1600s, 1700s, United Methodist, or the different Pentecostal things from Azusa Street to everything else in the 1900s. You got everything branching and everything, and then they take replacement theology with them. But as far back as you keep going backwards, and you go into even Roman Catholicism, you've got Constantine, you've got Origin, you've got those, and how far back that goes, that remains to be seen. But at some point, it did work its way in, and then it spread itself out. So whether it started with one of those two, or even further back beyond that, But yeah.
So none of this is really pure in the sense that, like you said, it branched off as different sects and different versions.
Yeah,
as Constantine, for example.
Yeah.
Constantine perceived something that wasn't valid, and
because remember, there'd be splits. There'd be splits upon splits, and people would go this way, and then they have a group, and then this group would say, well, now I'm splitting from your group into another group. Another denomination would be created.
Calvinism and all that other stuff.
And then you'd have those, like, remember towards, I think it was around the 1850, you'd have all those end times groups. You'd have the Latter-day Saints, the saints of the latter day, the Mormons. They'd say, well, we're really the saints of the latter days. And then we'd have someone come on and say, well, no, we're the true witnesses of Jehovah. We're the Jehovah Witnesses. And they'd be fighting over who's really the end times people. And then the people come and say, no, we're actually the people who witnessed the second advent of Christ, and now we're in the seventh day, the Seventh-day Adventists. And people will be fighting back and forth over who's really the true end time Christians. And they take with them replacement theology. And they all say that they're Israel with their blessings and their plan and their walk and their purpose, and they fail to realize that they're the body of Christ with the right gospel, with the right pattern, with the right everything else. And that's why when we look at the Bible rightly divided now, is why dispensational understanding and theology kicks in so well, and why all these others are just falling apart more and more. To keep going back to Ryan's answer, the more you look at these other theologies that are everywhere, the more they keep falling apart. And the only thing that rises to the occasion to take this book literally over and over and over again is dispensational theology. So.
And I guess when you come down to take this book literally, you have to have the premise that people understand that this is the true book, because that's the base, that's the foundation of any of these discussions.
Yeah.
And that's where some people I talk with, since they don't believe this is God's word, it's difficult to get a leg up on, if they're not taking this as the truth.
Yeah. Any thoughts so far on anything, Ryan, or any is this all right? Is this working out? No?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we got that. And then if anyone else has any thoughts, let us know as well. But that's so far, that's covenant theology, and that kind of doesn't pass the test. Replacement theology, that doesn't pass the test. The next one you get is what I've seen on Grace Ambassadors. They call it internet or Facebook theology, and that's where you go and you just research social media. You find different people posting different things, and that brings up things that you find unsubstantiated facts, and they use Bible verses to plug it in. And so people grab a post here and a verse there and a thing here. Next thing you know, they've got something plugged in based on what people are throwing, whether it be on Twitter or Facebook or whatever it may be. There's not enough Bible study being done. There's just people grabbing pictures and posters and Twitters and verses and things like that, and they're not actually studying the material. They're just grabbing and copying and pasting and posting and twitting and things like that. And so if you look at Colossians chapter 2, verse 8, this is where all this comes from. This is where, and we just went through the book of Colossians verse by verse a little while back. Colossians chapter 2, verse 8 says the material that all this is made up of. And it's right here. It says in Colossians 2, verse 8, it says that, beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ. When we want to go after Christ, we go into the Bible rightly divided. We don't go into social media. We don't go into these other things looking for things that will, be from who knows who, posting who knows what. And it takes Bible study to learn and to dive deep and to go into things to see what the Bible has to say about what the Bible has to say. And so we see there in Colossians 2:8, we can find things about philosophy on social media, vain deceits on social media, tradition of men's all over social media, the rudiments of the world is all over that, and not after Christ. That's
Sounds like feel good theology.
I mean, not even feel good theology. It's just not enough studies being done, and that's something where you see, like I said, I saw this mainly on Grace Ambassadors, where it was talking about Facebook theology. And it's taken from social media, from the internet, rather than digging into the Bible itself and studying, the word of truth rightly divided. So we see that there. And then as we talked about, if we look at Romans 16:18, Romans 16:18, talks a little bit about it as well, depending on who's posting what. And you never know who's posting what, or even if they post the name with what they're saying. Is it, anyone can say that they are anybody. It says that for they that are such serve not our Lord Jesus Christ by their own belly, and by good words and fair speeches deceive the hearts of the simple. So what they can post on it, what anybody can post, is good words and fair speeches. And if somebody posts good words and fair speeches, the first thing they put on there is a Bible verse. And the Bible verse can go along with covenant theology, it can go along with replacement theology, it can go along with any other theology except the one that is correct. And so you'll see a lot of that, especially on the internet. And so it's tough, but it's also something where the Bible rightly divided comes along. And, and this is where you mainly don't want to use it as your primary. Don't use it as your primary. Use it as, a little bit of a backup, but not as your primary. So we see that there, because they're in Grace Ambassadors, that's there. But if that's all you're using, that can be a problem too. So we see that there we got covenant theology, replacement theology, what we call Facebook theology. And then as we go into the next one that comes along is what's called holiness theology. When you say, what's going on with instructing those that oppose themselves, they oppose themselves in theology. Holiness theology is done by some Pentecostals, it's done by some Methodists, some Apostolics, Salvation Army, Wesleyan Holiness, the Wesleyan groups that are out there in Midwestern areas, and the Church of the Nazarene. This is something where they take the Bible, take all the Bible, and they say that a true Christian can't possibly sin after they're saved. So once they trust a gospel. It doesn't have to be Apostle Paul's. The way that they take the Bible and plug it in, and the agenda that they're using. And if you see, every theology has an agenda that doesn't line up with the Bible. It lines up with the traditions of men. It lines up with a certain religion. It lines up with a certain denominational belief system. And so people end up trusting a system rather than trusting the God of the universe and what he did for their sins. They end up trusting and being part of a system, a denominational system, a religious system. That is, they're happy to be part of a system every week, not part of God's plan. And so holiness theology says that they're part of, you can't possibly sin. Once you're saved, there's no way you sin. A life of absolute holiness has to be lived, if you're truly a Christian. So you trust whatever gospel they tell you, whether it's John 3:16, Acts 2:38, Romans 4, Titus 3, Romans 10:9 and 10, whatever they tell you. And then from that point on, if you've trusted it with sincerity, whatever the verses that they throw at you, you can't possibly ever sin ever again. And if you sin once, that means you're really not a Christian, is how they present it. And so some of the quotes that they'll say is that if someone loves God, they will obey all of God's commandments. So now you're under the law. Now you're obeying 613 commandments, and you're never supposed to sin. So that means they don't grasp what the purpose of the law is. That's Romans 3:19 through 21. And that through the Spirit's power, a believer will overcome sin. So they're saying that you've got the Holy Ghost resident in you, and God is supposed to keep you from ever sinning. And so,
And how's that working for them?
yeah, and they don't understand what Paul writes in Romans 7 is that you do have the Holy Spirit resident in you, but you also have your old man fighting against that. And you're that new creature. You're that new creature that has the old man who you used to be before you were saved, always trying to come back up and fight against who God made you. And you will always have that battle in you for the rest of your life until you die. And so you're always going to have, and that's what Romans chapter 7 is all about. So, but they go to verses such as 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 16. If we go there, 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 16. And if we go there, we'll see what they're taking. What they're taking literally is, not even their book. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 16. This is where they go with this. And of course, they pick out a verse. They cherry pick a verse. And they say, we're going to run on this verse and only this verse, and we're going to drive this verse into the ground. When it comes to holiness theology, they say, because it is written, be holy, for I am holy, and that's Exodus 19:6. And so, of course, if it's Exodus, you're going back to Old Testament Israel, you're going back to the Jews. But nonetheless, they're saying, be holy, for I am holy. Now, of course, if we're going to learn something from this, like we do in our studies, in dispensational study, of course, it's right to be holy. You should do good works. You should do what you can. You should do everything you can to be right, in right standing, as far as, doing good works in the dispensation of grace. But you're not going to be perfect. And we should understand that as the new creature, as the church, the body of Christ. So when we read that, we do what we can. And we understand God's made provision for when sin happens. And we just keep pressing on, even when sin occurs, and we forgive those that cause us trouble as well, knowing that Christ has already forgiven us in the dispensation of grace. So, as far as trying to live as holy as you can to the point of perfection, that's something you're going to stumble across, and you're going to end up lying. You're going to have to end up lying in order to say, well, I live perfect 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and that's religion. That's religion, self-justification, saying that I'm always perfect. When I go to sleep, I'm perfect. When I wake up, I'm perfect. When I go to work, I'm perfect. That's not going to work. But that is holiness theology. And that's why we come along and instruct those that oppose themselves. And this is why dispensational theology works out more and more, because as we go through covenant theology, we're finding that's not working out. When we go through Internet theology, Facebook theology, that's not working out. When we go through replacement theology, we're finding that's not working out. As we go through holiness theology, and we're looking at all the different denominations that plug into this, we're finding that all these different people who plug into this one way or another, it's just not working out for them. And so as we kind of shine a light on who these people are and what these theologies believe in and how they approach the Bible, taking things allegorically, taking things spiritually, taking things any way but literally, we're finding that the way that we approach the Bible dispensationally allows us to, again, go to God's word and say, these are literal words. These are the literal words of the living God that we can read and have and obey and understand, as long as we rightly divide it and understand the context. All these others, they have to brush that concept aside and say, we can't understand the God of the universe. We can't know what he says. We have to spiritualize everything and twist it into what we think he might have possibly had to say. Nobody can understand God. We're just going to make stuff up as we go along and hope we get it right. And that's what they do. And we're still going through a couple more theologies, but as we shine a light on all the other churches that are out there, and I say churches lightly, we're seeing what they're plugging themselves into every week, and we're finding that it's not working out for them. In the big picture, they don't know what the big picture is. And so that's some of the reasons why they end up, as you hear the term, backsliding. And there is no such thing as a backslider in the dispensation of grace. There's no such thing as that. Once you're saved, God has saved you, and you're in him and he's in you. You can't backslide when you're in Christ. Your identity and your position is in him. You can't backslide out of that. There's no such thing. But when you are in a covenant and you agree to do something, then you either do it or you fall away from it. When you trusted the gospel, all you said was, I'm a sinner. I can't do anything. All I can do is trust the fact that you did everything, and you can't backslide out of that. So we see that there, and that's going into holiness theology. Now the next one is your James Cone, your Pope Francis, your Barack Obamas, your Reverend Wrights, and that's liberation theology. And so you get a little bit political on this one, but this is where you approach the Bible and you get into saying that the church must deliver oppression from social injustice. And so this is where they take the Bible and they pull out the verses and they cherry pick the verses to where they have to jump into the political forefront, and they have to rescue the illegal immigrants, and they have to rescue the poor, and they have to rescue the prisoners, and they have to rescue the victims of social oppression, whoever they deem that to be this week or this month. And they have to go and they consider whoever they declare to be, say the illegal immigrants, they declare them to be like Israel going through the wilderness. So they will read the book of Exodus and they will say, since you can't take the Bible literally in liberation theology, you have to say that the Jews going through the wilderness are the illegal immigrants of today. That's how you apply that. So you have to go in, you have to rescue them, you have to provide for them, you have to help them, you have to do everything for them because God did it in the book of Exodus. And that's liberation theology. That's why Obama did what he did for his 8 years. He learned that from James Cone. He learned it from Reverend Wright. Reverend, using that term lightly. But this causes men in power to redefine economic systems, to liberate the poor, quote unquote, from their suffering. So whoever deems themselves to be poor, they look upon, men in economic power to rescue them and to redefine the shape of everything as far as the economy. And of course, the best way to liberate the poor and to liberate, the poor, the prisoners, the immigrants, and so on is through Marxism and socialism. And the best way to do that is through twisting scripture. They go through and they take scripture that belongs to Israel, belongs to the body of Christ, and they take that to fit their political structure. And so that's how they go through this. And so they do that by, they even go through revolutionary fighting. This is how this all got started back in the 1960s. Now, this is liberation theology is as new as that in the 1960s. And they even go far as to say that a man named Camille Torres went as far to say that if Jesus were alive today, he'd be a guerrilla fighter, fighting for the socially oppressed and the poor and the immigrants and so on. They say he'd have a rifle and he'd be going around just blowing people up for the sake of the poor.
So why don't, if they think that, if they follow the theory that you used or the example you used of the Jews in the wilderness, God fed them and God did all of that. So why don't they assume that God's going to do that today for the immigration migrants, for the poor people? In other words, how did it move from God doing it to us doing it? Are they trying to equate us to a God of some sort?
That's how they plug it in. Is that it's up to them as the Christian on the scene. That's what Christians do. Christians are the Christians don't go out and see souls saved with the gospel. Christians don't go out and see saints edified with the word of God. They go out and they feed the poor. A best example is Matthew chapter 25, verse 31. And this is the key verse that's even working its way into evangelical groups now. Matthew chapter, and that's why you'll see the evangelicals, they're starting to warm up to this. They're starting to take to this. So churches in our towns are starting to warm up to this. And that's Matthew chapter 25, verse 31. In the past 10 years, they've successfully snuck this into the evangelicals out there. Matthew chapter 25, verse 31 is where they take liberation theology. This is not how this is supposed to be read, but this is how they do it. They say, when the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory, and before him shall be gathered all nations. So they're looking towards the future in all this. And he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divideth his sheep from the goats. And he shall set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, Come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungered, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. So you're seeing all these things where he's saying that there's people on his right hand, and he's saying these people are blessed of my Father that are ready to inherit the kingdom, because at some point Jesus was there. Jesus, who was represented by the illegal immigrant, Jesus, who's represented by the prisoner, Jesus, who's represented by the naked and the hungry and the sick and the one. And it even says, I was in prison. So that's why you see, Obama letting prisoners go, because that's Jesus. And you got to let him out. And you're seeing here people who are naked, clothe them and throw a bunch of money at them. And he visited me, and then it says in verse 30, then shall the righteous answer, Lord, when saw we thee and hungered and fed thee and thirsty and gave him drink, and stranger and took him in, and naked and clothed thee? Or when we see him in prison and came unto thee? And the king should say unto them, Verily I say unto you, insomuch as ye have done it unto the least of these my brethren. Now these my brethren, of course, are the little flock of Israel, as we know it in dispensational theology. But to the liberation theologian, it's the person who just chopped up his neighbor and doing 25 years in prison. And so the way you liberate that person is you just let him go. Just open the jail doors and set him free. Do an executive order and let that guy out. He says, you've done it unto me, because you did it as you did it unto this guy, you did it unto Jesus. That's liberation theology. Then shall ye also say unto them on the left hand, Depart from me, ye cursed. So the people who don't do this, who don't help, who don't donate and give all their money to socialist, Marxist economies, you're going to be cursed, according to Reverend Wright and Barack Obama. So if you don't dish out all your cash into a socialist economy, you're going to be cursed by God one day, per Matthew 25, 31 through 46. So they don't look at it dispensationally. They don't see it according to how God wrote it. This is liberation theology. And so when you take the entire Bible like this, you look at Isaiah 61, you look at Jeremiah 7, Matthew chapter 10, Deuteronomy 15, Proverbs 14, and the whole entire Bible, seen through the eyes of a wrong theology, you'll see that we do need to come along and instruct those that oppose themselves. And that's what we're looking at tonight, and why dispensational theology just looks better and better with each wrong theology that we're looking at. So, and that's why we're seeing it. As we continue to, just zoom in on the different theologies that are out there and that are kind of causing quite a bit of trouble. So we're going through that, and let me see where we're at on time. Want to make sure that we're covering any thoughts or questions in the meantime that we go through all this. Everything so far so good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But yeah, as we go through this is why you're seeing, this is why when you're asking, why should we believe dispensational theology? Why are we doing this for? Why are we believing in mid-acts dispensational right division as a theology? Why don't we go to something else? There's so many other people in this world believing so many other things? Why do we do this for? Why don't we just go to the church up our street? There's so many other people you can spend time with. They got a what's it called? You can eat at every week. Potluck. You have a potluck every week. Fellowship dinner every week. You can sing songs every week. But are they teaching the Bible correctly? Are you able to understand literally the words of the living God correctly every week?
Are they teaching the Bible at all?
Are they teaching the Bible at all? In some cases, yeah, absolutely. And that's why I would say, after going just through some of this, now we've only gone through about 4 of these things. We've only gone through we've only got through covenant theology, replacement theology, Facebook theology, holiness theology, liberation theology, and this has probably covered maybe 50 to 60% of your town.
When you put it the way you just put it a little while ago, it's like you go to a specialist because they're knowledgeable in whatever they specialize in. So if you go to the doctor or you go to the knee doctor, you're going there because of your knee. If you're going, in theory, these people that are going to the church, and I'm going to use words all lightly, but they're going there because they want to, in theory, learn about how to be saved, how to go to heaven, how to know God better. And after hearing you say all of this, it's like they're falling poorly, they're failing in their job.
Yeah.
Like you said, they're doing everything but teaching how to save your soul and the Bible and about God. Yeah. And that's a shame. And people are accepting that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they don't know any better, I guess. You only know what you're raised up in a lot of times.
Yeah. And they don't know what they're looking for.
That too, they go into the like in a youth ministry, they're looking for boyfriend.
Yeah, they're going to the church for other reasons. Mm-hmm. They're saying, God, I want to go to church so I can find a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or I'm going there for money, or going there for a job. God, give me a job. And so they hear a verse, or they hear it and they're like, wow, it's like the pastor was talking to me because he read this verse to me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like, well, the verse was meant for the little flock of Israel going through a tribulation, and it's not meant for you. But you think it's because you want it to. And the pastors know what to throw at people. Pastors know people are on hard times. They need money. They need jobs. They want to get married and raise a family. So the pastors know their audience. If they're looking at single men and women, they know, oh, got to preach a message on find your mate. And if they're looking at people driving up in clunky cars, like, oh, got to preach a money message this week. So
like for the kids ministry, called kids ministry, instead of teaching like the one in Grace Ambassador, they're studying, there is like they entertain them while the parents is.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Instead of babysitting.
Yeah, instead of teaching.
Yeah.
It's really different.
Yeah. And so that's why we're looking at the different types of theologies that are out there. That's why a lot of people, if you gave them 3 weeks, they won't find the gospel for you. They don't know it. They don't know where it's at. They've never read the Bible. Most Christians have not read the Bible from front to back. They've never read it. They've never engaged it. They've never observed. They've never studied it. And so that's why we do that here. That's why we encourage it, because God commands it. 2 Timothy 2:15. Again, it's not a suggestion. It's not an option. It's not a. It's what God commands us to do, to study it and to rightly divide it. People won't rightly divide their Bibles. They say, well, you're just chopping up the Bible. You're taking the Bible and ripping it up and chopping it out and twisting it around. And, no, actually, we're rightly dividing the word of truth, which is what God said to do. It's not an option. So.
The Gospel Latino is John 3:16.
Yeah.
That's the famous.
Yeah, it's the most famous one, John 3:16. They say John 3:16 is the gospel, is what they say. But if you go to John 4:22, it says salvation is of the Jews, and it should be in the book of John. But they don't read that, because nobody reads their Bible, nobody studies their Bible, nobody engages it. No one sees that. In John chapter 4, verse 22, salvation is of the Jews. John chapter 5, verse 28, you got two resurrections, one based on their good works, one based on their bad works. So it's conditional. It's covenantal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. But yeah, just going through these theologies, we're seeing, why should we study this? Why should we be mid-acts dispensational? We're seeing because the other options are not looking good. The other options are not going to get anybody saved. The other options are not going to help anyone learn their Bible and allow us to take God literally. Nothing else is allowing us to take God literally and understand what he has to say. It's just nothing's letting us do that. So when we go through that and we see that, and we see the covenant theology and the Facebook theology and the replacement theology and the holiness theology and the liberation theology, nothing lets us take God literally. And that's what we want to do. We want to be able, when we pray, we want to speak to God literally, and we want to engage God literally when we pray. When we study, we want to see what he had to say to us and believe it literally. So everything is literally. Everything is taken point blank. We don't want to, go to God and imagine if you're going to work, and your boss says, take these two boxes and put them on the shelf. And do you mean that spiritually? Do you mean that allegorically? Do you mean that metaphorically? How do you mean that, boss? He's going to say, get out of here.
Having said what you said, there are, I don't remember, I know it's in Paul's letters, but he said this is allegory. So
yeah, we take the entire Bible. Yeah, that's a good point. We take the Bible literally everywhere we find it, except where the Bible says, hey, this is an allegory. And that comes up rarely, but it does come up. And that's going to be in Galatians. Let's find it. Galatians, let's find where that's at. I think it's chapter 6. Might be 5, might be 6. Let me find it. And if anyone else finds it, let me know.
okay.
Galatians 5 or Galatians 6? I believe it's 5. Galatians 4. So maybe Galatians 4. Verse 24. Galatians 4, verse 24. As he goes and he talks about how Abraham had two sons, the one by a bondmaid, the other by a free woman. But he who was of the bondwoman was born after the flesh, but he of the free woman was by promise, which things are an allegory. So as Paul goes to explain, this is of the flesh, this is of the free woman. He's saying all this is an allegory to explain that Agar in verse 25 is Mount Sinai in Arabia. So he's saying this is all an allegory. As I explained this to you, Galatians, regarding Christian freedom, regarding what's going on. This is all an allegory, so you can get where I'm going with this. So everything is literal,
Unless
even
it says otherwise.
unless Paul's saying, hey, this is an allegory. And Paul will say, literally, I want you to know this is an allegory. So yeah, it's a good point. So these different theologies that come up, this is where we see how this all plugs in. And then the one that we also see is dominion theology. As we kind of go through the other theologies, this is also what plugs in for the Latter-day Reign movement, the Roman Catholic, or some Roman Catholics, New Apostolic Reformers, fivefold ministry thinkers. It's called dominion theology. This is also a political thing, just like liberation theology was. And it pretty much says that it's a Christian political ideology. And it shows that it's an attempt to achieve governing authority. It says all Christians everywhere should be bringing in the kingdom right now. And it's also called kingdom now theology. So it's called a dominion theology. And it pretty much says that there should be Christians everywhere bringing in God's kingdom for him right now. There should be Christians in politics, Christians in governors, Christians in government. Christians should be bringing in God's kingdom by ruling and reigning for him. And and so
He needs our help.
yeah, like he needs our help to do that. And so Genesis 1:28 is the verse that they use. Genesis 1:28 is the main point, the main verse that they'll use. So they pretty much run with it and say that Christians or the church must rule in all areas of society, whether it be personal, corporate, or government. And it's Genesis 1:28 that they use to go by this. And pretty much where God speaks to Adam and Eve, they run this verse to fulfill this whole theology. And they say, and God blessed them and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. So they say, okay, that's what I'll do. I'll take dominion over everything. And I'll do it for you, God. And I'm gonna take dominion over everything. So that's why the Catholics, some of them do that. That's why they kind of had crusades going on. They were looking to take dominion over the earth, which is God's purpose and plan for Israel.
Even if they had to kill 66 million people.
Yeah, they kill 66 million people to do it, of course, for all the wrong reasons. But some of these people that call themselves Christians are still trying to do that now. But that's how they're reading this book, and so they're making no difference in dispensations, or making no difference between the Israel and the church, the body of Christ. They're just running with the religious agenda presented before them. So, as we see dominion theology, we're seeing that this is something, and they also go as far to say that all Old Testament laws are still binding today in order to help us do this. So that's going to fall apart on them real quick. And since Constantine used this, so this has been around since. This is also another Constantine thing. So we see that there. But then we get to where we are. Now we're getting back to, since we went through all these wrong theologies, which is pretty much making up all of our, where we are, where we live, and who we run into and who we are trying to reach. And we're seeing that all these different theologies and how they fail. Now we're getting to where we are. We're in dispensational theology. Now we're back where we are. And it's the method of respecting God's progressive revelation throughout the scripture, and separate ways of dealing with humanity throughout the ages. Dealing with humanity, how God deals with mankind throughout the ages, throughout the dispensations. And so we can see this plug in here. A good definition for all this, if you go to Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1. And it's the book of Hebrews, so that's one thing. But a good definition that we can go to, we're going here for definition, is if you want to explain what dispensationalism is, we'll use the Bible to do it. And we'll take Hebrews 1:1 to do it. And so what we'll see here is it says, God, who at sundry time and diverse manners spake in time past unto the fathers by the prophets. But we're seeing those first couple of words there. It says God who at sundry times, and sundry is just saying multiple or many. In many ways and diverse manners spake. So you're seeing that there, that even in Hebrews, we're seeing definition, we're seeing information, we're seeing that in sundry times and diverse manners spake. That's where we want to be at. That's where we want to be understanding that the Bible even explains God spoke in many ways and sundry times and diverse manners. That's what we want to understand. This is what all these other theologies fail to understand, is Hebrews 1. Is what is being explained to us there. And so when we go through that, this is where we go to understand that's dispensationalism. And we can see the dispensation of law, the dispensation of promise, the dispensation of grace. We know that through Ephesians chapter 3. We go to verse, I believe it's verse 2. Ephesians chapter 3, verse 2. So a lot of people will say, well, dispensations are wrong, dispensations aren't biblical, dispensations aren't in the Bible, dispensations don't fit, dispensations aren't true. Paul would never say dispensations, God would never say dispensations. But then you find it in Ephesians chapter 3, verse 2 in your King James Bible. It says, if ye have heard of the dispensation of the grace of God, which is given me to you. So God gives it to Paul, Paul gives it to us, and we give it to others, and others give it to others. And it says, if ye have heard of the dispensation of the grace of God. So we are in the dispensation of the grace of God because Paul tells us that. And
Well,
God told Paul.
he even tells us in Ephesians 1:10 that there's another dispensation coming.
Yeah, Ephesians, exactly. In Ephesians 1:10. Yeah, and then the dispensation of the fullness of times. So they got one coming up, the dispensation of the fullness of time. So if you want to ruin somebody's covenant theology, take them to the book of Ephesians. Show them Ephesians 1:10, show them Ephesians 3:2, where it comes up twice. Then I believe it's 1 Corinthians 9:17, and that shows the dispensation that was given unto Paul.
There's Acts as well, so I'll go with that.
And it goes in, and it keeps going on through there. But you've got three types of dispensationalism that goes on, at least currently right now. You got Acts 2 dispensationalism, mid-Acts dispensationalism, and Acts 28 dispensationalism. And all that has to do is that there are dispensationalists who believe that God spoke at sundry times in diverse manners, but they disagree at where the church started. You'll have your Acts 2 dispensationalists say, well, we absolutely believe that the church started in Acts chapter 2 when the Holy Ghost came down at Pentecost. And it doesn't fit because that's the little flock of Israel. You got the mid-Acts dispensational, which is us, that say that once Saul was saved on the road to Damascus, he was saved by doing nothing right. That's where we come in. We get saved when someone explains to us the gospel, and we didn't do anything right. So Paul is our pattern, and he was the first one saved in the church, the body of Christ, in the middle of the book of Acts, not mathematically, because there's 28 chapters, and the middle of the book of Acts would be 14. We're seeing it in Acts chapter 9. So in all the middle of the events in the book of Acts is mid-Acts dispensational. So we're mid-Acts. And then you got your Acts 28 that say that everything that Paul wrote prior to Acts 28 has to do with Israel. And then towards Acts 28, you have Paul's epistles that matter to the body of Christ. So Paul's writing two messages. And so that gets messy. That turns into a mess because that can't possibly be. So you got those three going on. But then that's where we are. That's where things turn out to be. That's why when we look at not only dispensational theology, we have to look at the right dispensational theology. When we look at every other theology, we find out why it just doesn't fit. We find out that you can't take God at his word if you're in it, and if you're locked into some other theology. Because some other theology has a man-made agenda, some other theology has some sort of other religious agenda, where God doesn't mean what he says, where God isn't really who he says he is in his word. Or it's some sort of social agenda, it's some sort of political agenda, it's some sort of religious agenda, it's some sort of man-made agenda. And so the blinders come on to where you can't read this book in its fullness. And as God would say, you can't have the manifold wisdom of God unloaded unto you. And so we want that manifold wisdom of God. We need that manifold wisdom of God. I believe it's Ephesians 3:10. When we know the manifold wisdom of God, that's what we want. That's what we want to know is the purpose. And so people say, well, why do people believe all this? If there's 90% or 60% of everybody hearing all this wrong information, we just figured it out in about an hour. How come people have they've been locked into this for 50, 60, 70, 80 years, and they're just not coming out of it?
Because they have an agenda.
Well, because yeah, they've got a man-made agenda, but one is that they don't do enough study. Not to put it all on them. There's multiple reasons, but one is that they're just not studying their Bibles. They're not jumping in and figuring out, hey, this guy's lying to me. So one thing is they're not doing 2 Timothy 2:15. They're not studying their Bibles enough to see, is what the Bible says matching up with what they're saying.
And they're trusting the wrong people, because I remember so many times I was told, listen, they're the experts. They went to school specifically to learn this, so they have to know so much more than you could ever know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in theory, that makes sense. I mean, I'm not a doctor. They went to school for that. They studied it. So obviously they know more about medicine than I do. But that's not the same thing.
Yeah. Well, if they went to school for covenant theology, if they went to school
Yeah.
for liberation
Yeah.
theology, if they went to school
Yeah.
for replacement theology, then
Yeah.
they're going to know a lot more about covenant theology, but they're not going to know about God's word according to what he literally said.
Mm-hmm. Especially if they get their pension from their church.
Yeah. And so they're not going to have the overall picture either. If they don't study, they won't have the overall big picture, the overall timeline of God's plan for the dominion of having dominion over the earth and having dominion over heaven. The prophecy program and the mystery program, or prophecy and mystery. The mystery of Christ and prophecy. And so we find that, those two terms in the Bible. We find the mystery of Christ. We find old time of prophecy. And so we find that there in God's word. But yeah, when we find those things, we rightly divide those things, we find the whole Bible opening up to us. And we find God, his word opening up to us, so we can read it, learn from it, grow from it, memorize, study it, apply it when needed, where needed. And the big picture of what God's doing opens up to us. So we can see that there. And of course, the last thing is that, one, people don't study enough. Two is that the whole big picture of what God's doing is not open up into people. And three is that the whole world is under Satan's influence. And so that's Ephesians 2:2. This is right about where we're going to wrap up. But Ephesians 2:2 goes on to say that wherein in time past ye walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience. So we know that the whole world is under Satan's influence. Or it's under Satan's influence. It's on a course, the course of this world according to the prince of the power of the air. So the whole world is on a course. And we know that he's trying to intentionally redirect everybody to follow these other theologies. Now, why would the devil want people to go to heaven to be with the Lord after he intentionally died on the cross to pay for everybody's sins, when he can set up false theologies everywhere and set up his own ministers of self-righteousness everywhere and set it up so that people can be tricked and blinded? As we know from 2 Corinthians 4, verse 3, we know that the God of this world has blinded the minds of them which believe not. And he's blinded the minds of the people. He hasn't blinded the eyes. He's blinded their minds through all these theologies so that they can't understand this book. If you can't understand what God's saying, you can't understand who he is and what he's doing and what the big picture is. And that's what the devil wants. The devil doesn't care if you have a rosary. The devil doesn't care if you show up at a building every Sunday at 10 o'clock. He couldn't care less. As long as you don't understand what the gospel is, and as long as you don't understand what's happening, he's thrilled to death. So it's pretty much seen that if you think that you can go to heaven by works and by self-achievement and by self-esteem and by self-righteousness, the devil loves it. He's happy with it. That's his agenda. And so we see that there as he plugs into this. As long as you don't know about preaching Christ according to the revelation of the mystery, he's fine with that. And if we look at Isaiah 14, verse 13, we'll see what the devil's 5-point game plan is. Isaiah 14, verse 13. There's 5 things that the devil sets up as he's got this whole world under his own influence. Isaiah 14, verse 13.
Yep.
And he says here, he says, for thou hast said in thine heart, he says, 1, I will ascend into heaven. That's the first thing he has on his game plan. He's in his own mind, he's gonna go there. He'll get there no matter what he's got to do. I will ascend into heaven. 2, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. So he's going to ascend his throne, not God's throne, his own throne. 3, I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation on the sides of the north. So he's going to exalt his mount, his throne, himself above everyone else. In verse 14, 4, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. So he's looking to ascend himself above the heights of the clouds so that he can be the one that's worshipped, not God. And then number 5, I will be like the Most High. So he says, I will be like the Most High. He's going to counterfeit him. He's going to copy him. He's going to look like him. He's going to act like him. He's going to reach out to be worshipped. And so he's going to set up false ministers, false gospels, false ways to be worshipped. And that's where you find all these false theologies. That's where you plug in. That's where you plug in all these, theologies like we just went through: dominion theology, holiness theology, liberation theology, covenant theology, all these theologies that people are plugging themselves into, thinking it's the right thing. Because what better way to do this is with Bible verses, out of context, not in their right ways, not rightly divided. So with that, we'll stop here and see if we have any new questions for next week that we can keep going with this. And see if we got. Yeah.
New question, but I kind of think you might need to discuss the topic about there are a lot of dispensationalists who don't really rightly divide because they still think that we should be blessing Israel.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, this has come up a lot because I had followed a guy called Chuck Baldwin. I don't know if you've heard of him. He ran for president years ago on the constitutional ticket, and he was a dispensationalist, and now he's decided he's no longer a dispensationalist because of the blessing of Israel thing. But he's blaming it on Schofield.
Huh.
And so I haven't really, you have to buy his DVDs to actually figure out what he believes, I think. But I don't want to pay for him,
Oh yeah.
So
Are
yeah,
you
I'd be interested in how the dispensationalists, because this is the kind of dispensational and I've always run into in the Baptist churches, is blessing Israel. We have to bless Israel. And I'm like, well, how does that fit?
The John Hagees?
Yeah. But I mean, there's a lot of Baptist churches out there that believe this way. I've been to them, pretty much all of them. And I don't know how they get that. I don't know how they go back to, Genesis 12:3 and decide that's for us today still. Yeah.
Well, I think even America does that. They do the.
Yeah, they do.
It goes back to I forget what that's called. There's a doctrine that America took up in the 1800s, and it's just escaping my mind right now. But they had that manifest destiny, destiny.
Mm-hmm.
And they said they had that right to to conquer everything, and that was God's plan and purpose.
I run into this all the time. Almost every group believes in this, and it's not good. I don't think. Yeah, because it affects our politics. It affects everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There might be some covenant theology in there where they think that they are a part of what Israel. If they bless Israel, they're a part of what God's plan and purpose is today, because it's be all one plan, might be all one big purpose.
Yeah.
Well, if you listen to John Hagee on TV, that's exactly what you get from him. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll look more into that. We'll dig more into that. But
Well, he's one of them. I mean, the Plymouth Brethren, I guess, followed this too. And they say a lot of people got it from Schofield's Bible, actually. So.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because of 12:3, his notes on 12:3, Genesis 12:3. So.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah, I grew up thinking this for years. I mean, I don't know of hardly any Christian that doesn't think this way in my own personal life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they see it. They see it all over the TV and everything. So.
What's Genesis 12:3?
Genesis 12:3 is, I will bless him that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, it's totally taken out of context.
You would what?
I said, yeah, that's totally taken out of context.
Yeah, but they do it. I mean, I really don't know. I don't think I've ever been in a Baptist church that didn't believe this, except maybe one, because they were Calvinistic. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah.
I do have a question. Is universalism a theology, or is that just?
But it's more of a doctrine. Universalism, that's where everyone is saved, and you don't need to, go out. When Jesus died on the cross, he saved everybody.
Okay, so that's not a theology. That's what. Okay, you
It's
said
more of a doctrine.
Okay.
You could, like Calvinism is a doctrine.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
But yeah. But that's something that can creep in.
Well, isn't that mainly in a sense? Because don't they believe they're the universal church?
Well, no, that's not
Something entirely different.
That's something entirely different. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they say they're the one true church, but everyone says they're the one true church. And that's the thing about mid-Acts dispensations. We think that if you're saved, you could be actually everywhere. You could be anywhere. And if you sincerely trusted the gospel at some point in your life, and you kind of wandered off, I mean, you could be saved, and you could be any church anywhere. We don't know how many people are actually saved right now on planet Earth. I mean, we hope there's more than there really isn't. But I mean, you could be anywhere. But we're still going to give the gospel to you again. We don't know who. We don't know who's where.
So how would you differentiate, since based on his question, theology versus doctrine?
Well, theology is going to have a series of doctrines.
Okay. So that's kind of the main umbrella, so to speak, and underneath it you'll find the doctrines and so on.
Yeah. There's going to be the doctrine of this, the doctrine of, whatever it may be. The doctrine of the judgment seat of Christ versus the doctrine of, versus the theology, versus liberation theology, where there's a whole series of beliefs. So, but I hope mainly this answered, or at least it started. It may not have completely answered Ryan's question, but I hope it started some sort of foundation. Hope it started something. So, did it help out?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. So you see, like everyone has some sort of belief system in their church building, but it doesn't allow them to believe the Bible literally.
So everything comes down to the Bible.
Yeah, it all comes down to the Bible being the final authority, the words on the page being what we need to study. And if you can't study the words on the page, you know, you get in trouble. So, but yeah, that's where we're looking to go. So, were there any new questions? We can go into like part 2 next week with this, Brian, or anything that will this kind of created more questions?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. Yeah. So it looks like what we'll kind of go into next week is we'll kind of look into more Greek versus English and more like dispensationalists, why are they blessing Israel? We'll kind of dig into that, and we'll kind of do a part 2 of people instructing how we're instructing those that oppose themselves, and more doctrine, more things like that. So, but that's kind of the idea, is that as we go through this, we're kind of seeing why mid-Acts dispensationalism keeps coming up on top, keeps working out, keeps coming through. Because it's one thing to say, you need to do this, you need to study, you need to rightly divide. We can say this all day long. But why are we doing this? And it's mainly because number one, God said to. God said to do it. But number 2, when you do other things and you get away from Paul and you get away from what God said to do, we start finding that there's all these other things out there that just don't allow us to trust God at His word.
Well, this is a good way to show people, because again, so many times people will say, and I'm sure we've all heard it, oh, so the whole world is wrong and you few people are right. And it's like, yeah, it says so right here.
Yeah.
Well, in the end, that's really how everybody really believes.
Yeah.
When it really comes down to it.
Yeah, that's true. That's Ryan's brought up a good point. There are people who are in covenant theology, liberation theology, and they're saying, well, we're right and everybody else is wrong. But
well, I'm saying just in general, like with us too, because we're saying, we have the thing to back us up, but they have their own belief, and in the end, it comes down to everybody has their own. You're right, you're wrong, or I'm right, you're wrong. Kind of mentality. Does that make sense?
Yeah. People will say that, but then we have to let the rubber meet the road on the words on the page. We have to go beyond what people say and go into what this book says. And we have to go beyond, what because people will say that all day long, but then what does the word of truth, what does the Bible actually say in itself, is what we have to come to and study to see for ourselves. So you're right, people will say that. The liberation theologians will say, we're right, you're wrong. The covenant theologians will say, we're right, you're wrong. And we'll say, we're right, you're wrong. But then we have to come and say, well, why are they saying that? Why are we saying that? Is it true?
A lot of people are very earnest in their belief, but they could also be earnestly wrong.
And the actual truth of all this, when you go into God's word, is let God be true and every man a liar. Because we're wrong too. Right? We need to come to this book and allow this book to be true and allow ourselves to be wrong. That's what the truth is. And it's Romans 3:4. The truth of the matter is Romans 3:4. Instead of saying, because what we're not doing is we're not saying we're right and everybody else is wrong. What we're saying is let God be true and every man a liar. That's Romans chapter 3, verse 4. That's our answer to that, is Romans 3:4. Let God be true and every man a liar.